I just finished Riot Games' newest indie title, the Mageseeker, and I can confidently say that I am pretty disappointed with it. And when I look at other reviews, I see everyone else giving it 8s across the board with mostly positive reception. Meanwhile, I'm sitting here asking myself, is something wrong with me? Why can't I see the 8 out of 10 game that the Mageseeker apparently is? And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this game has a lot of jank in it that just ruined the fun for me. And it sucks because I was actually kind of interested in this game. You see, I've actually played League of Legends for a very long time now. I started playing back in Season 2 when I was in middle school, and I've been playing it pretty regularly for the better part of a decade now, putting in literally thousands of hours into it, and even to this day, I still play this game on a regular occasion. It's no stretch to say that I've played League of Legends for pretty much half of my life. And it's only up until these recent few years that Riot Games has started to expand their game portfolio and really put the games in Riot Games. So when I heard that Riot Forge, Riot Games' indie branch, were working on a game that featured characters from the League of Legends universe but in a more fleshed out setting, I was kinda excited. But that excitement quickly turned to disappointment with how Mageseeker turned out. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that this is a bad game by any means. In fact, I think it's actually a good one. But Mageseeker could have been so much better if it weren't for the numerous little frustrations that I had with the game that just built up to ruin my overall fun with this game. I know my opinion might be a hot take, but I really think that Mageseeker isn't as good as all the reviews say it is. Now, let's take a step back for a bit so I can explain what Mageseeker is about. Mageseeker is Riot Forge's latest indie game developed by Digital Sun based on the characters from the League of Legends universe. In this game, you play as one of the playable characters within League named Sylas, who was imprisoned by the Mageseekers of Demacia for 15 years for being a mage. Now the reason why they imprisoned him for being a mage is because being a mage is a big no-no in Demacia because magic very bad. So in order to combat the sin of being a mage, they've created a hyper-zealous order called the Mageseekers to do what the name implies and seek out the mages and capture them. One of those mages they imprisoned was Sylas, and Sylas is a particularly dangerous mage because he has the ability to copy the magic of whoever he touches. So they eventually decide to execute him. But before they can finally bring the blade down his neck, his friend Lux runs up and hugs him for some reason. And as she hugs him, he steals her powers and uses them to break free from his shackles and start our mage rebellion. And this is where the game starts. Before I talk about my gripes with this game, I want to first go over what this game does well. The first thing and probably the best element about this game is that the art style is extremely good. Mageseeker has some of the most beautiful 2D pixel sprite work I've seen in a while. Each of the environments are so heavily detailed and so vibrant with color that they always urge me to just stop and admire what the artists have done here because it is just a visual feast for the eyes. I also love how animated the character sprites are. Even though they're these tiny faceless models, their animations breathe so much life into them. They're flashy, colorful, and fluid. And if it's one thing that the developers absolutely nailed, it's the art direction, because this game is stunning to look at. Now, as for the story, I actually kinda enjoyed it. The story follows Sylas and his journey as he builds a rebellion against Demacia. What I liked about the story is how they managed to include a variety of champions from the MOBA into this game in a way where it makes sense to the lore, while also giving more tidbits of it throughout the game. The League of Legends lore is actually really deep, and this game is only but a fraction of the literally hundreds of stories that are within League itself. Now this story takes place within one of the many factions of Runeterra called Demacia, and a lot of the boss fights featured within this game are characters from League of Legends, so that was really fun to see some of my favorite champions being fleshed out in this game. And the main character himself, Sylas, is completely different in this game than he is from his MOBA counterpart, because if you're not familiar with how he is in the MOBA, Sylas is pretty much a straight up villain. He's devilish, he's unapologetic, and he's chaotic. I mean, look at his shit-eating grin he has in his splash art. If you're smiling like this while chained up, you are not a trustworthy person. I think it's pretty safe to say that Sylas is portrayed as a pretty bad guy within League. Now compare his League persona with how he is in Mageseeker, and it's almost a complete 180. In Mageseeker, Sylas is more of a morally gray character with a lot more heroic traits. I suppose here he's more of a vengeful hero. Like, he's not against killing anyone that poses him, but he also really cares about his friends and helping people. And I really like that they made Sylas in this game a lot more nuanced, and he actually feels like a believable person that goes through his own personal growth throughout the game. It adds a human element to him, and it's a refreshing take on what his character means within the League of Legends universe. And for the love of God, someone get this guy a shirt. He's been running around half naked for the entire game. Doesn't he ever get cold? Now, unfortunately, not all characters in this game are as interesting as Sylas. Some characters are just mustache twirling, Saturday morning, cartoonishly evil villains. Like the lead researcher of the Mageseekers, Hesbeth, who seems to be just evil for the sake of being evil. He does these really cruel experiments on the prisoners in his underground lab, turning them into these horrific abominations because of reasons? Who knows? He's just a bad guy we have to kill because he's a bad guy. And while I did enjoy seeing all these characters interacting with each other outside League of Legends, unfortunately there isn't any voice acting for the majority of the game. I think there are only like 3 cutscenes that were actually voice acted, and it was kind of a letdown that this game published by Riot Games couldn't get a full voice acting, which is really lame. But this is an indie developer I'm talking about here, so I can forgive the lack of voice acting because voice acting itself is a whole nother complicated process, but it still would have been nice to have. Now let's talk about the gameplay. For the most part, the gameplay is decently fun. A little simplistic, but there's enough depth to it that allows players to experiment a little bit and individually tailor their playthrough to what they prefer. Mageseeker is an action beat-em-up RPG that plays a lot like a roguelike. You got your standard combat stuff like a light attack, a heavy attack, a dodge, etc. And there are a few combos that you can use in this game that end with an elemental attack. But what's kind of weird about it is that before you start a mission, you can only select 2 out of the 6 combos to bring with you. My question is, why can't I use them all? Why am I only limited to using 2 combos each mission? It's such a weird design decision that only serves to hold back the game and make it become a simple button masher. What's unique about the combat in this game is the copy mechanic, where you can steal a spell from an enemy and use it for yourself as a single-use consumable. Each enemy has their own unique spell they can steal from them, and it was genuinely really fun to take these spells for myself and use it against my opponents. There's also this sort of yin and yang elemental weaknesses in this game that forces you to think about the element of the spell that you just stole and how to best apply it in order to exploit the elemental weaknesses of the enemies. This adds an extra layer of depth to the combat and made me have to think carefully on where my next spell would be most effective. You can also permanently take these spells with you to tailor your gameplay to your own individual playstyle, including the ultimates, and it was just really nice that I could bring my favorite spells with me on each mission. And there are a plethora of spells in this game that you can bring with you because of the large enemy variety that Mageseeker has. I think this game did a good job at keeping the gameplay refreshing by slowly introducing newer enemy types as the game goes on, and I actually found that there was a good variety of different enemies, and most of them give you a unique spell for you to use. There's also a base upgrade mechanic that happens when you recruit more people to your resistance. And the more people you recruit, the more your base becomes robust, making it a pretty lively place by the end of the game. It also serves to upgrade your combo abilities and unlocks more of your skill trees as you get more and more people to your resistance. There are also simple RPG stuff like an upgrade system that lets you upgrade Sylas' stats with the currency you've collected on your missions. But unfortunately, these upgrades aren't really interesting because they're mostly a stat increase, like do more damage or have more health. The developers didn't really try to go out of the box and experiment with interesting skills, and it honestly makes the game kind of boring. The RPG mechanics here are pretty lackluster, and there's just not enough meat here to really sink my teeth into. There's really not that much player agency, and it makes me wonder, did this game really have to be an RPG? Like, what value did the stat upgrade system bring to this game? Because if you remove these upgrades from Mageseeker, the experience of this game would have been exactly the same, and that's what really makes this a letdown. Now, what isn't a letdown are the bosses in this game, for the most part. The boss fights here are really well done. They're beautifully animated with multiple phases. They have a variety of attacks that change up depending on the phase of the fight. They're extremely cinematic and they were really fun to fight. I think my favorite fight was probably the jarvan and shyvana fight. It was just so cool seeing the dynamic between these two fighting both at the same time with their multiple phases that just progressively get crazier and crazier. The boss battles in Mageseeker are easily the highlight moments of the game. What's annoying about them, however, is that the cutscenes for the boss fights are unskippable. Yeah, that's right, every time you die and have to redo the whole boss fight again, you have to sit through the whole entire dialogue cutscene every single time. Why is it that in the year 2023, we are still having games with unskippable cutscenes? It's not like the developers don't know how to skip a cutscene, they even do it for one of the boss fights. So why are we forced to sit through the rest of them? This just seems like a massive design oversight and feels like no one on the QA team actually playtested this on the hardest difficulty to check the quality of life of these boss fights. For example, one of the boss fights you fight this armored mole thing with Lux. I mean, it's a cool fight and all, but the reset point for this fight is just awful. For this area, there are 2 dialogue cutscenes that you have to go through in order to fight the boss. You have to walk up to Lux at one of the cliffs and talk to her, then you have to walk all the way over to the left side and talk to her again, then the boss will show up. That's all well and good, but tell me why when you die to the boss, it resets you all the way back to the section before the first dialogue. Was this another design oversight or was this intentional? Because every time I died to this boss, I had to run back to Lux and talk to her, then run to her again and talk to her again. Every single time. Now extrapolate that to all the other bosses, and I would say that at least an hour of my overall playtime came from just having to sit through these cutscenes every time I died. And I died a lot because I was playing on the hardest difficulty. This massively ruined my overall enjoyment of the game and just made it a slog to go through. If you didn't know already, Mageseeker is a linear single player experience. You got the main story campaign, then there are some side missions. That's it. I completed both the main story and all the side missions on hard difficulty, resulting in about 9 hours of total playtime in order to beat the whole game, which is really short for the asking price of $30. And the low playtime is a symptom of the distinct lack of content in this game, because aside from the main story missions, there are only 2 little quest chains that have about 5 quests each that are all about 10 to 20 minutes each, which adds up to about 2 hours of playtime from the side mission and 7 hours for the main story. Now normally I wouldn't mind the low first time completion time if the game had a lot of post game content or replay value, but Mageseeker doesn't have any post game whatsoever, no bonus content or challenges, and it doesn't even have a new game plus. There isn't really that much of a reason to play this game again after you finish it other than to get the platinum trophy. And not only is there very little content, but there's actually day 1 DLC for this game. I know this probably isn't the developer's fault for this, and the blame probably lies with Riot Games themselves, but it's kind of a slap in the face that this game has the audacity to ask for more money when they can barely make the $30 asking price worth it. And finally, the nail in the coffin that seals the deal on why I thought Mageseeker was a lackluster product, and it's because of the numerous bugs and glitches within it. I found quite a bit of bugs and glitches during my playthrough that range from kinda funny to downright game breaking. Here are some of the glitches I found. The AI for one of the boss fights just completely broke and just stood there while I beat her up. I got stuck inside the forge after I upgraded it, forcing me to reload my save file. Invincible enemies. An audio bug whenever I use this specific spell. And this isn't a bug, but there are multiple spelling errors in the text that were just really funny, like Cyclone or Occult Shield, and my favorite ultimate ability, Cataclysm. There's probably more misspellings in the game, but I think you get the idea. And I know this is an indie developer, so I can sort of let some of these issues slide under the rug because maybe they don't have the manpower or the experience to fix these issues. But come on, having misspellings for important abilities like these just makes this game look amateurish and unprofessional. And I don't want to be the one that's harsh in the indie game, But when they're charging the same amount of money as games like Hi-Fi Rush, then I gotta hold it to the same standard, and unfortunately Mageseeker falls short. Overall, Mageseeker was made with a pretty limited scope in mind, which was to tell the story of Sylas and his personal growth as he assembles a group of wildly different personalities to help with the rebellion against Demacia. And to their credit, they did this pretty decently well. The story was interesting enough to keep me hooked the whole way through with its beautiful 2D pixel art, engaging boss fights, and simple yet fun gameplay. But unfortunately, this game makes quite a few blunders that hold it back from being a really great game. Like how there's no voice acting, or how the RPG mechanics are only surface level stat upgrades, unskippable cutscenes, day 1 DLC, no post-game or bonus content, a plethora of bugs and spelling errors, and a really short completion time, which all cement my overall disappointment with this game. Now, even though I have a lot of complaints for Mageseeker, I still don't think it's a bad game, and there's still a lot of fun to be had here. But for the asking price of $30, it's really difficult for me to recommend this game at full price. So that's why I can only recommend it at full price if you're a really big fan of League of Legends lore. Otherwise, wait for a sale. What do you think? Do you agree or disagree? Let me know in the comments down below, and make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more reviews in the future. See ya.